the Prime Minister of Ireland. Leo Varadkar is his name. Now, you would have heard the story over the weekend of a girl called Emily Hand, 9 years old, who was one of the hostages who had been taken by Hamas, and she was thought dead, and her family had been told. They believed that she had been killed, but then, of course, she was found and she was returned as one of the hostages. So the Prime Minister of Ireland put out a congratulatory tweet, as you would expect him to do, but it was a little bit odd because he said this is a day of enormous joy and relief for Emily Hand and her family, all fine so far. Then he goes on to say an innocent child who was lost, as though she just wandered out the front door and didn't come back, has now been found and returned, and we breathe a massive sigh of relief. Our prayers have been answered. No mention of Hamas, no mention of terrorism, no mention of the fact she was a hostage, no mention of the fact that they thought she'd been killed. She was just lost, and now she's been found as though she were a jumper that you left on the bus. I mean, come on, how pathetic can you be? But I've got to say, one of my favourite features of Twitter these days, or X as it's now called, is a thing called community notes, where people can actually go on and correct you if what you say is vastly wrong. And then Twitter puts a little note underneath your tweet that demonstrates exactly how wrong you are. And the community note here absolutely bodies Leo. Emily wasn't lost. She was abducted by terrorists from Hamas. I mean, why didn't he just say that in the first place, for Christ's sake?
Well, I think it's clear, like Ireland is doing much like Scotland's doing. Their First Minister, who is their Prime Minister, they just call it a funny name over there because they've got to be different. They're Scottish. And he's thrown the doors wide open, says, oh, we welcome all Gazans. He himself is Muslim. He himself has family in Gaza. So at first I was like, yeah, it figures. But Ireland is seeing at the same time buses of illegal immigrants just being bussed in. You can watch residents in these Irish neighbourhoods literally saying to the police, what are you doing? And crying and saying, please don't leave them here. Please don't do this to us. So this is one of the many countries. Now, I don't know where they've come from on those particular buses, but this is another country. This is another Prime Minister of the West who has simply got this weird open borders policy that his own people are not benefiting from. But anyway, on this account, you absolutely have to love this satirical account, also on Twitter now known as X, which is Mossad, but it's not the real Mossad. They do say, we're the satirical guys. They then posted a picture of the Irish Prime Minister with Emily Hand saying, thank you, Leo. We haplessly misplaced her. And there she is with a photoshopped lost and found box popping out of it. Somebody who also wasn't taking this man's rubbish for a single second was our mate on Sky, Piers Morgan. He also took to Twitter to slap down the Irish Prime Minister, saying, no mention of Hamas, no condemnation of Hamas, no description of her kidnappers as terrorists. Your full statement is just as weak and weaselly worded as your tweet summary that she'd been lost and found. Because, of course, the Prime Minister got in so much hot water for that initial tweet. He then issued a full-page statement trying to dig himself out of the hole that he dug. It didn't work. As Piers pointed out, you still haven't backtracked on what offended everybody.
Well, in trying to dig himself out of the hole, he just created a deeper hole because, of course, that phrase, I was lost but now I'm found, comes from a parable that Jesus told about a young man who, went and spent all his father's fortune and then finally comes home, admits his wrongdoing, and Dad says, my son, he was lost, but now he's found. Now, it's very different to compare a kid who's made a stupid mistake but comes to his senses with a girl who's been kidnapped by terrorists, taken hostage. This guy was lost and found. This girl was rescued from evil terrorists. Not only that, but he tried to explain his statement to Jewish people by quoting from the New Testament, which is probably not the greatest thing to do for Jewish people who, of course, don't recognise the New Testament.
I'm not willing to hand that to him. I have a feeling the Irish PM doesn't.
He doesn't
really
exactly
know much
quote scripture a lot either.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this is this phrase, she was lost but now she's found. it creates this passivity in the population. Don't get angry. It's not terrorists. It's not evil people. Don't think about things like good and evil. Just be relieved she's home and don't read too much into what's going on in the world.
Well, the objective is to downplay what has happened, because if you accept that Hamas are terrorists, then all of a sudden, oh my God, the attack on October 7 wasn't a good thing, and maybe the Jews are right here. I mean, we can't possibly have that. It's pretty clear to see where he stands, and then, as you say, the statement he put out afterwards didn't help him whatsoever. Again, I've never understood why politicians, when they get something wrong, just come out and say, I'm very sorry, I got it wrong, here's what I should have said, goodbye, instead of giving us these long screeds that are basically, oh, but I could have done this.
Yeah, but of course the reason why they don't, and much the reason why most of our federal Labor ministers talk out both sides of their mouth, is because they can't then come out and be like, oh, I take it back. This was a genuine mistake. Now, this is what I really meant. No, we all know what you really meant. You said it initially.
Well,